If you've seen the popular TV show The Office, then you know that Steve Carell plays Michael Scott, who's this manager for a paper company. And he was a really good salesman, but as a manager, he's lacking in kind of understanding some people's skills and knowing what he should and shouldn't do, and often says or does things that are inappropriate, which then kind of sets up the comedy for the show. The show is set up so that it's kind of like a fake documentary following what is happening in this one branch of this paper company. And as the seasons go along, Michael's antics gets to a point where the people at corporate decide to put with him a co-manager. And so Jim Halpert, played by John Krasinski, becomes his co-manager. And together they run this branch of this paper company. In the sixth season, where they're co-managing, there's this episode where they start to find out some news that maybe the company's not doing so well. Maybe the company's going to go bankrupt. And Michael and Jim have very different approaches to how to address this. With all the uncertainty and anxiety, Michael brings the whole staff into a conference room and then starts to play a murder mystery game with them, goofing around. And then over time, as a little bit more news starts to trickle in that maybe there's something going wrong behind the scenes, maybe the company's going to get bought out or something, Jim gets real frustrated with Michael. Why are we playing this game? This is dumb. This is stupid. Some people kind of go back to work. Other people are frustrated. Some people are still trying to play. And it gets to the point where Jim just gets so frustrated that he pulls Michael off into a separate office, closes the door. But before Jim can say anything, Michael gets in his face and tells him to stop. Just let people have their stupid game. And you see what comes out in that moment and then in the rest of the episode is this realization that the uncertainty, the anxiety is going to be there. There's nothing anybody can do about it. And that while Michael seems often to be kind of the bumbling manager who always gets things wrong, in this moment, he understands something very important. That what the people needed at that moment was not to be so laser focused on their job and their work to worry and stress and be anxious, but instead to find a moment of joy in the midst of uncertainty, to find some time to play, to spend time with each other, to enjoy each other's company, to do something silly. And so Jim kind of takes on and helps everybody get back into the game. And it feels like this moment of learning where Jim is like, oh, I don't know everything. And Michael might actually know some things. And I think part of that is because when it comes to fun and playing and joy in general, that often seems like something that's secondary. It's not necessarily important. It'd be nice if we get around to it. It'd be nice if we have some time to play. It'd be nice to have some time to have fun or to try and work on creating joy. But you know, it's something extra. As a youth pastor, it's not something I can think of as extra. I have been working with teenagers since I was a teenager, and most of that time as a youth pastor. And one of the things I do a lot is games. I know how to do games with PowerPoint. I know how to do games without. I know what to do as far as a game with just 2 or 3 people versus 50 people. I have played so many games as part of my ministry and part of my work. It seems almost ridiculous. And there are times where it feels like over the years I've become just a glorified party planner. Where it's like, okay, I've got to make sure I've got the cake and the snacks and the pizza and the game set up, and I've got like a car trunk full of bouncy balls or pool noodles or whatever else is necessary for whatever event that is happening. But part of it is because there's just this assumption that in order to engage with young people, it has to be fun. There has to be joy. There has to be that element of excitement and energy and engagement. And yet, it seems as though as we become adults that it's not as important. Joy is not as important. And yet, we come here at this Christmas season. We're on our 4th Sunday looking at the themes of the Advent wreath, and we've talked about love and hope and peace, and our last theme here today is joy. We go back to the story from last week, the story of the shepherds. The angels appear to the shepherds, and what do they say? They have good news of great joy. that the coming of Jesus, this whole Christmas season, is supposed to inspire joy. And you see what the shepherds do. They go out and they go find Mary, and they're excited and they tell everybody. It is a time filled with excitement, with energy. I mean, you even go to Paul, who seems so serious all the time, and he lists the fruit of the Spirit. It's love. What's the second one? Joy. Before peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Joy is important. I would say joy is essential to the Christian life, and I think sometimes we forget that as a church. Every Sunday morning is supposed to be a celebration of the resurrection. We are supposed to be coming together every Sunday morning as a Christian community to celebrate what God has done. And yet it seems so often that joy is something extra. It's something that, yeah, it'd be nice if this is fun and happy, but we need to get business done. We need to get the serious things done first. And so this week and today, as we're heading into Christmas, I want us to stop for a minute and maybe consider that joy is important. And not just that joy is important, but that it's necessary. And not just that it's necessary, but that if you're a Christian, it is essential. A part of being a Christian is to try and live a life of joy. And so first, we've got three things here. First is try not to be a killjoy this Christmas season. I think for my wife, there are two kinds of people. There are people who like celebrate and decorate for the holidays, and then there are people who are wrong or doing it wrong. She and her mother as well are both people that they just go all out for almost any holiday. And it's definitely to the point of like getting themed shirts, matching shirts. We've got matching shirts for the holidays. We had matching shirts for Halloween as well. I don't know how much the matching shirts thing is going to go. It's probably going to depend on how much matching shirts Walmart has for which holidays. But she is all about decorating and celebrating and making the holidays as big as possible, and not just Christmas, but also Thanksgiving, Halloween, birthdays. If there's a chance to celebrate, let's celebrate. Let's do it big. And there are times where I'm just tired because it's like, oh my gosh, how do we have so many things? And what was funny this year was my mother-in-law was cleaning out her house of a bunch of stuff, and we already have like 2 buckets of Halloween stuff in our basement, and my mother-in-law brought over 2 more buckets worth of Halloween stuff. I'm like, I don't even know. We had so much Halloween stuff, we couldn't even put it all up. There wasn't a place for it. And I think like it's very quickly can become, oh my gosh, there's so much to put up and clean up and all this. It can be very cranky very easily. But if I just shut my mouth and keep all that to myself for a bit, and I just see how my wife and my daughter get to enjoy the decorations and the holidays and trick-or-treating and time with family at Christmas and blowing out candles at birthdays and all of the kind of unwrapping of presents and all of the fun that comes with the Christmas holiday, like, it's worth it. To see family come over and get to experience it as well, the joy that brings is well worth the little time that it takes. And doesn't need my crankiness. And so the holidays can be a lot of work. And sometimes we do too much. We're trying to do too much. We're trying to do everything. And there is certainly something to be said about doing less and just taking time to enjoy each other's company, enjoy time together. But let's try not to be a curmudgeon stick in the mud in the midst of the holiday season, because the joy is important. The time together with family and friends is important. And it is not less important than the so-called serious stuff that we need to get done. Second is that the gospel should inspire joy. You see, the angels came with what? Good news of great joy. What was the reaction of the shepherds? They ran. They ran everywhere. They told everybody. They were so excited about what had happened, they couldn't shut up about it. And you see that throughout the scriptures. People run into Jesus and they are so excited. Their life is so transformed by this encounter with Jesus that they can't stop talking about it. They can't stop sharing about it. And I think if you've met someone who's had that kind of transformative experience in your life, you can see it as well, that there are people who have encountered God in this deep, profound, transformative way, and they can't not talk about it. In contrast, it makes me think sometimes, like Sunday mornings, we're not always the most celebratory or exciting bunch on Sunday mornings. I remember several years ago I was at this church, and I was doing youth ministry stuff there, and they had brought in this group from South Africa who did the church service like they do it there in South Africa. And as you might imagine, it was a little bit different in style and feel than the suburban white church that I was working at. And this guy pulled me aside afterwards. Not one of the youth parents, not someone I typically have a lot of dealing with. He's one of the church members. I know him. We've talked occasionally, but like not someone like we do a lot of shared ministry together. And he pulled me aside and was just real frustrated with how noisy and chaotic the church service was. And I was like, okay, well, tell me about that. And so he goes on to say that, like, for him, like, the church service needs to be somber. It needs to be solemn. It needs to be quiet and peaceful. It needs to be like walking into a cemetery, which I don't know what I said. I said something nice and we talked a little bit and it was fine. But like in my head, I'm like, well, that's why people don't want to come. Like if our goal is to make a church like a cemetery, like of course people aren't going to come. Like who wants to come to the place where it's like, hey guys, don't be too excited. Don't be too loud. Make sure that you are orderly and quiet and solemn and somber like a cemetery. Right? It feels like it so misses the point. And I understand like that desire for reverence. But it's also like it's supposed to be a celebration. That there is a God who loves us enough to come down to earth to meet with us where we are. That God loves us unconditionally no matter what we do. That God has created us for a purpose. That no matter how dark things might get, no matter how hopeless things might seem, it is never truly hopeless. That there is always good news to be had. How is that not something to jump up and down about, something to sing about, something to be excited about? And so I think back to that moment and it makes me laugh a little bit, but it also makes me a little sad because it's like, are we missing this core component of the gospel? That it's not just about being serious and somber, but is about celebrating. I mean, one of the things that gets pointed out a lot, at least among pastor friends of mine, is that the first miracle that Jesus performs is creating wine at a wedding. The wedding party was about to run out of wine, and what does Jesus do? He makes sure the party keeps going. Which is, I mean, it's kind of a funny thing to say, but there is truth in that part of the kingdom of God is a place of joy and celebration. God doesn't want us to run around like zombies who are so super serious, so uptight, so lacking in any kind of celebration or joy that people steer clear of us. That's not the gospel. The good news of Jesus is life that is abundant and free. It is a life of joy, of deep joy. And so with that, like, where does that joy come from? And so third, the source of our joy is found in God's love. And we see this in the John 15 passage, where Jesus is talking about how he wants the love of God to be within himself and his disciples so that the joy he experiences of that deep connection with God, his disciples can experience, and their joy can be complete. We find our joy when we realize how much God really loves us. We learn to share that joy as we love other people. I think a lot about my little girl and how there's this really funny moment about this time last year where she's super into Sesame Street, and she's still kind of into Sesame Street. But was super into Sesame Street, and her her uncle, my brother-in-law, got her this Elmo toy, and she was super excited about that. And I was out getting whatever, running errands, and I saw this Cookie Monster toy. And I was like, oh my gosh, she loves Cookie Monster. This is going to be the greatest thing ever. So I get the Cookie Monster. I get home. And it is an epic failure. Epic failure. She is scared of it. It makes noises when he tries to eat the cookie. Like, it does not go well. It goes poorly, right? And I think in that moment, it could be very easy to be frustrated. It could be very easy to be upset. And it was a little sad and disappointing, but the joy that comes from just spending time with her is so much deeper than that moment of, oh, this didn't work out. And she's since come around to the Cookie Monster toy. And we've had other ups and downs of things she's been really excited about. Like her grandparents got her a trampoline. That's very exciting. And other things. But what doesn't change is that smile on her face when I give her my whole undivided attention. I can get her toys, I can get her favorite snacks and all of that, and that brings out some happiness and all of that. But for her, being 2.5, what really brings out that joy is just being focused on her. Playing with whatever, running around, singing together. It's that connection, it's that relationship. And if you're wondering, you know what, I don't feel very joyful. I've got all of these things weighing me down. I've got a lot on my mind. I'm stressed. Or you know what? Maybe it's like, you know what? Life is fine, but I'm not happy. Can't really put a finger on why. Things just aren't quite good enough, or they don't quite work, or something's off. Let me invite you to open yourself up to the love of God. Because when you experience and know the deep, unconditional love of God, it is hard to feel anything except joy. Now, if you're going through a hard time, there will be grief, and there will be sadness, and there will probably be darkness there. But the love of God can be a light in the midst of that. To remind you that the darkness is not all there is. The grief is not all there is. The sadness will last for a time, but it will come to an end. And that, I think, is the difference between the joy we have in our connection with God versus kind of the happiness that we pursue out in the world. We can be happy with our toys and our gifts, and that'll last for a day or a week or a month or a year, or who knows. But the joy that we have when we have that deep connection with God persists throughout the hard times of life. It is a light that shines in the darkness, no matter how overwhelming that darkness may feel. And it doesn't mean that it will spare us the sad times or the hard times. But it does mean that we will remember we will not be alone when we experience those hard times. And so today, as we start this week looking to celebrate the birth of Jesus, let us remember that Jesus came so that we might have joy. And that joy, fun, happiness, playing together, having a connected relationship, these things are not extra side things that we should get to eventually if we have time, but these are essential core parts of what it means to be a human, and certainly what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And so let me challenge you this week to prioritize joy in your life. That as we come to Christmas, let's put joy at the center. Try and let go of whatever crankiness or whatever worries or stress. We can come back to that next week. Let us this week pursue a life of joy and see what God can do to bring light into our lives, no matter how bright or dark they may be.